The fluorescent lights of Save Mart buzzed overhead as Brian Mitchell stood in the checkout line at 11 o'clock on a Tuesday night. His daughter Sophie wailed in his arms, her face red and blotchy from crying for the past 30 minutes. Her diaper had leaked through her Odyssey, leaving a damp spot on Brian's only clean shirt. The smell made other customers shift away from them in line. Brian barely noticed anymore. He had bigger problems than sideways glances from strangers. In his free hand, he clutched a single pack of diapers. Size 3. The cheapest brand the store carried. $12.47. He had counted the crumpled dollar bill in his pocket at least 15 times since walking through the automatic doors. $1. That was all that remained of his last paycheck from 3 months ago. His wallet sat in his other pocket, empty except for expired credit cards and a photo of Sophie taken at the hospital the day she was born. 18 months ago, when life still made sense. When he still had a wife, a job, and a future that looked brighter than the harsh store lights currently burning his tired eyes. Brian shifted Sophie to his other hip, trying to quiet her cries. She was hungry. The formula had run out yesterday morning. The WIC vouchers would not reload for another 3 days. He had given her water mixed with a tiny bit of sugar to calm her stomach, but it only worked for an hour. The eviction notice sat folded in his back pocket. Orange paper. Bold letters. 72 hours to vacate the premises. That deadline had passed 6 hours ago. His landlord, Mr. Peterson, had changed the locks this afternoon while Brian took Sophie to the park, trying to keep her entertained with nothing but his presence and the free swings. They had returned to find their belongings in garbage bags on the curb. Brian managed to grab 2 bags before Mr. Peterson called someone. Probably the police. Brian did not wait to find out. Those 2 bags now sat in a shopping cart outside the store. Everything they owned. Clothes that did not fit anymore. A stuffed rabbit with 1 ear missing. 3 baby bottles. A broken digital camera with photos Brian could not bear to look at. And Sophie's birth certificate, the only document that proved she belonged to him when his wife walked out 5 months ago without a word. Brian watched the customer in front of him load groceries onto the conveyor belt. Steak. Fresh vegetables. A birthday cake decorated with purple flowers. Ice cream. Orange juice. Bread. Milk. Normal things that normal people bought. Things Brian had taken for granted 2 years ago when he had a steady construction job and a savings account that actually had money in it. His stomach growled. He had not eaten in 2 days. The last meal had been half a hamburger he found in a park trash can. Not his finest moment, but pride disappeared somewhere around the time he started sleeping in his car. Except he no longer had a car. It had been repossessed 4 weeks ago. The cashier, a teenager with blue hair and bored eyes, scanned the last item for the customer ahead. Brian watched the total climb on the screen. $73.82. The woman pulled out a credit card without hesitation, swiped it, and gathered her bags. She did not look at Brian as she passed. Brian stepped forward. The cashier looked at Sophie, still crying, then at the single pack of diapers in Brian's hand. Her expression softened. "Is this everything?" Brian nodded. His throat felt tight. Words seemed hard. She scanned the diapers. The beep echoed in his ears like a judge's gavel. $12.47 appeared on the screen in red numbers. With tax, that is $13.36, the cashier said quietly. Brian's hand trembled as he pulled out the dollar bill. He stared at it, then at the screen, then at Sophie's wet, miserable face. The math did not work. It never worked anymore. No matter how hard he tried, the numbers always came up short. "I only have $1, Brian said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I thought maybe it would be enough. I thought maybe the price was different. I am sorry. I should not have wasted your time." He turned to leave, still holding the diapers, fully intending to put them back on the shelf. Sophie screamed louder, as if she understood they were leaving empty-handed again. Behind him, a man cleared his throat. Brian turned and looked at the person who had been standing in line behind him. A man in an expensive suit, probably in his mid-40s, with gray at his temples and eyes that looked tired despite his clean appearance. The man held a basket with a single frozen dinner, a bottle of wine, and a greeting card. "I will take them all," the man said. Have you ever been in a situation where you had to choose between your pride and your child's needs? What would you do? Drop a comment below and subscribe to hear how this story unfolds. Your support helps us bring more stories of hope and kindness to the world. Brian stared at the stranger. I am sorry, what? The man stepped closer, setting his basket on the conveyor belt. I said I will take them all. The diapers. And anything else you need. Carol, start a new cart for this gentleman. The cashier, whose name tag Brian finally noticed, said Carol, looked between Brian and the stranger. Mr. Harrison, are you sure? Very sure, the man said. He looked directly at Brian. I am James Harrison. Let me help you, please. Brian felt his knees weaken. Sophie's cries had faded to whimpers, as if even she sensed something important was happening. I cannot accept that. I do not even know you. James smiled, but it was sad around the edges. That is exactly why you should accept it. Because I am offering it freely. No strings. No expectations. Just one parent to another. I am not a charity case, Brian said, but even as the words left his mouth, he knew they were not true. He was exactly a charity case. He was worse than that. None of us are, James replied. We are all just people trying to survive. Some days we give. Some days we receive. Today is your day to receive. Let it be simple. Carol already had a cot ready. She looked at Brian. What else do you need? Brian's mind went blank. What did he need? Everything. Food. Formula. Wipes. A place to sleep. A job. Health insurance. Hope. The list was so long he could not speak. James placed a hand on Brian's shoulder. Let me make this easier. Carol, fill the cart with baby supplies. Formula. Food. Diapers in the right size. Wipes. Medicine. Bottles. Whatever a little one needs. Then add basic groceries. Bread, milk, peanut butter, canned goods. Simple stuff. Carol nodded and walked away from the register. Another employee took over while she personally shopped for Brian. I do not understand why you are doing this, Brian managed to say. James looked at Sophie, who had finally stopped crying and was now staring at him with wide, curious eyes. Because 5 years ago, my wife and I had a daughter. She would have been about this age right now. But we lost them both in a car accident. Some drunk driver ran a red light. Brian felt his chest tighten. I am so sorry. Me too, James said. Every single day. I built a company worth millions, but I cannot buy back what matters most. So when I see a father fighting to take care of his child with his last dollar, I see purpose. I see an opportunity to do what money is actually supposed to do. Help people. Change lives. Make the unbearable slightly more bearable. Carol returned with a cart overflowing with supplies. Diapers in multiple sizes. Cans of formula. Baby food. Bread. Peanut butter. Apples. Crackers. Juice boxes. Basic necessities that looked like treasure to Brian's eyes. Ring it all up, James said, pulling out a credit card. And add whatever he was getting. The total climbed to $347. James did not blink. He swiped his card and signed a receipt. Brian felt tears burning his eyes. He had not cried since the day his wife left, but watching this stranger do what no one else had done broke something inside him. Thank you, he whispered. I do not know what else to say. You do not have to say anything, James replied. But I do have one question. When did you last eat? Brian hesitated. A couple days ago. James nodded. There's a diner 3 blocks from here. Open 24 hours. Come with me. Let us get some food in both of you. And then we are going to talk about how to get you back on your feet. If you want to, that is. Brian looked at Sophie, who had grabbed onto James's tie and was smiling for the first time all day. He looked at the cart full of supplies. He looked at this man who had appeared out of nowhere like an answer to prayers he stopped praying weeks ago. Okay, Brian said. Okay. The diner smelled like coffee and bacon grease. Brian sat in a booth by the window, Sophie finally calm in his lap. She grabbed at the crackers the waitress had brought while they waited for food. Real food. Hot food. Brian's stomach cramped at the thought. James sat across from them, his suit jacket draped over the seat beside him. He had loosened his tie. Without the formal business armor, he looked more human, more tired, more real. "So," James said after the waitress took their order, "tell me how you ended up in that store with $1. Brian bounced Sophie gently on his knee. She was gnawing on a cracker, content for now. "It is a long story." "I have time," James replied. "And nowhere else to be. My apartment is empty. Has been for 5 years. So talk. Start wherever feels right." Brian took a breath. "I met Sophie's mother, Jennifer, 4 years ago. Construction site. She was doing interior design for one of the buildings we were working on. We fell in love fast. Too fast, probably. Got married after 6 months. Got pregnant right away." He paused, remembering those days. The excitement. The plans. The future they mapped out together. "Things were good at first," Brian continued. "I made decent money. She had her business. We had a small apartment in South Austin. Nothing fancy, but it was ours. Then Sophie came. And Jennifer changed." "Postpartum?" James asked gently. "Maybe," Brian said. "She never wanted to see a doctor about it. Just said she made a mistake. Said she was not meant to be a mother. Said she felt trapped. I tried to help. Tried to take on more baby duties. Worked extra hours to pay for things so she could have time to herself. But nothing worked." Sophie dropped her cracker. Brian picked it up, brushed it off, and gave it back. Such a simple action. Something he did 100 times a day now. Something Jennifer refused to do. "When Sophie was 3 months old, I came home from work and Jennifer was gone," Brian said. "No note. No explanation. Just gone. She took her clothes and her car. Left everything else. Including Sophie." "Did you try to find her?" James asked. "For a while," Brian admitted. "Called her family. Her friends. Everyone said they had not heard from her. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Eventually I stopped trying. What was the point? She made her choice." The waitress returned with their food. Pancakes and eggs for Brian. A grilled cheese sandwich cut into small pieces for Sophie. A burger for James. Brian stared at the plate in front of him. His hands shook as he picked up the fork. "Eat," James said. "I will hold her if you want." Brian hesitated, then passed Sophie across the table. She went willingly, grabbing James's finger with his sticky hands. James smiled at her, and Brian saw the grief flicker across his face before the man hid it behind gentle words and silly faces that made Sophie giggle. The first bite of pancakes nearly made Brian weep. Warm, sweet, real. He forced himself to eat slowly, even though every instinct screamed at him to shovel the food in before it disappeared. "So you were raising her alone?" James prompted. "What happened with work?" Brian swallowed. "I kept my construction job for another year. Had a good crew chief who let me bring Sophie to the site sometimes when daycare fell through. But then I had an accident. Fell off a ladder. Broke my arm in 3 places. Required surgery." He held up his left arm. "Even now, 3 months post-recovery, it still ached in cold weather. Workers' compensation." James asked. "Company fought it," Brian said. "Said I was not following safety protocols. Said I was distracted because of personal issues. Lawyered up and everything. I could not afford to fight back. So I got dropped. No compensation. Medical bills piled up. Could not work construction anymore because the arm never healed right. Lost strength. Lost range of motion." He cut another piece of pancake, watching syrup pool on the plate. Savings ran out fast. Daycare alone was $800 a month. Then there was rent, utilities, food, diapers, doctor visits for Sophie. I applied everywhere. Fast food, retail, warehouses. Nobody wanted to hire someone with limited mobility and a baby who needed flexible hours. "Family?" James asked. "Friends?" Brian shook his head. "Parents died when I was 22. Car accident, actually. No siblings. Friends kind of disappeared when Jennifer left. People do not know what to say when your life falls apart. So they just stop calling." Sophie reached for the grilled cheese pieces. James helped her grab one, his movements practiced and natural. "You were a father before," Brian observed. "For 9 months," James said quietly. "Claire, My daughter. She had my wife's eyes. Brown like chocolate. I only got to hold her a few times before the accident. Margaret, my wife, was driving home from her parents' house. The other driver crossed 3 lanes. They died on impact. I was supposed to be in that car too, but I stayed late at the office. Always stayed late at the office. The weight of those words settled over the table. Brian understood. Guilt had a way of attaching itself to grief, making everything heavier. I am sorry, Brian said. Me too, James replied. Every day. But I learned something in therapy over the past 5 years. Suffering is not a competition. Your pain does not diminish my pain. My loss does not make your struggles less valid. We are all just trying to survive the cards we have been dealt. He helped Sophie with another piece of sandwich, then looked directly at Brian. Which brings me to why I followed you to this diner instead of going home to my empty apartment. I want to offer you a job. Brian blinked. What? I own Harrison Tech Solutions, James said. We do cybersecurity and IT consulting for mid-sized businesses. We have offices here in Austin. Corporate headquarters, actually. And our facility manager just retired. I need someone to oversee building maintenance, coordinate with vendors, manage the cleaning crew, handle basic repairs. It is not glamorous, but it is steady. And it comes with benefits. I do not have experience in that, Brian said carefully. You have construction experience, James countered. You understand buildings. You understand how things work. You are reliable. You are motivated. Those are the qualities I need. Everything else can be learned. Brian's heart hammered in his chest. Why would you do this? You do not know me. Because I have more money than I know what to do with and nobody to spend it on, James said bluntly. Because I see you trying to be a good father with nothing but determination and love. Because 5 years ago, someone gave me a chance when I was just a kid with ideas and no funding. An investor believed in me when nobody else would. He changed my life. So now I pay it forward when I can. He pulled a business card from his wallet and slid it across the table. The job pays $4,000 to $5,000 a year to start. Health insurance, dental, vision, retirement matching, 2 weeks paid vacation, sick leave. And we have an employee assistance program that includes childcare subsidies. Brian stared at the card. James Harrison, CEO. The company logo. A phone number. An email address. Proof that this was real. I also have a friend who runs social services through the county, James continued. Her name is Nicole Harper. She can help you navigate temporary housing programs, food assistance, medical care for Sophie. No judgment. Just practical help to get you stable while you get on your feet. This is too much, Brian whispered. No, James said firmly. This is exactly enough. This is what people with resources should do. Help people who need it. You are not asking for a handout. You are a father trying to provide for his child. That deserves support. That deserves respect. Sophie yawned, rubbing her eyes. The food and warmth were making her sleepy. James handed her back to Brian, and she immediately snuggled into her father's chest. So what do you say? James asked. Will you let me help? Brian looked down at Sophie's face. Peaceful. Federation safe. For the first time in months, she looked like a baby instead of a victim of circumstances beyond her control. Yes, Brian said. Yes, I will take the job. And the help. All of it. Thank you. James smiled, and this time it reached his eyes. Good. Finish your food. Then we are going to call Nicole and see about getting you into temporary housing tonight. Tomorrow, you come to my office and we will start the paperwork. Sound good? Sounds perfect, Brian said. And for the first time since Jennifer left, Brian felt something he thought he had lost forever. Hope. James made the phone call right there in the diner booth. Brian listened as he spoke to someone named Nicole, explaining the situation in calm, professional tones that somehow made Brian's desperate circumstances sound manageable. Fixable. Like a problem with solutions instead of an endless spiral. She will meet us at the church in 30 minutes, James said, ending the call. First Baptist on Riverside Drive. They have a family shelter program. Clean rooms, safe environment, Case management services. It is not permanent, but it will give you stability while we figure out the next steps. Brian shifted Sophie in his arms. She had fallen asleep, her small body heavy with exhaustion. I do not know how to thank you. You already did, James replied. By saying yes. By letting someone help. That takes courage too. They paid the bill and walked to the parking lot. James's car was exactly what Brian expected. A sleek black sedan that probably cost more than Brian used to make in 2 years. But James opened the back door and helped Brian secure Sophie in a car seat he pulled from the trunk. You keep a car seat in your car? Brian asked. James looked away. I bought it after the accident. Told myself it was in case I ever needed to drive a friend's kid somewhere. But really, I think I just could not let go completely. It felt too final. They drove through Austin's late-night streets in silence. The city lights blurred past the windows. Brian watched the familiar landmarks. The Capitol building lit up against the night sky. The Congress Avenue Bridge where tourists gathered to watch bats at sunset. The university campus where students still walked even at this hour, living their uncomplicated lives. Brian used to be one of those people. Young, optimistic, believing that hard work and good intentions guaranteed success. He knew better now. Life did not care about fairness. It just kept moving, crushing whoever could not keep up. Tell me more about your construction background, James said, breaking the silence. What kind of projects did you work on? Brian welcomed the distraction. Commercial mostly. Office buildings, shopping centers, apartment complexes. Started as a laborer right out of high school. Worked my way up to journeyman status. Was on track to become a crew chief before the accident. What did you enjoy about it? Brian considered the question. Building things. Seeing something go from plans on paper to actual structures. Knowing that people would live and work in spaces I helped create. There is something satisfying about physical work. Seeing progress at the end of each day. That translates well to facility management, James said. You will be maintaining instead of building. But the principle is the same. Creating safe, functional spaces for people. They pulled into the church parking lot. A modest building with a lit sign that read All Are Welcome. Brian spotted a woman waiting by the entrance. She wore jeans and a cardigan, her dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. She smiled as they approached. Brian, this is Nicole Harper, James introduced them. Nicole, Brian Mitchell, and his daughter Sophie. Nicole extended her hand. Hi Brian. James told me a bit about your situation. I am here to help connect you with resources. No pressure. No judgment. Just practical support. How does that sound? Good, Brian said. Really good. They followed Nicole inside. The church was quiet at this hour. Their footsteps echoed on tile floors as Nicole led them through hallways decorated with children's artwork and bulletin boards announcing community events. She stopped at a door marked Family Services. The office was small but comfortable. Soft lighting, cushioned chairs, a desk with a computer. Nicole gestured for them to sit while she pulled out paperwork. Let me get some basic information, she said. Just demographics and immediate needs. Then we will get you set up in temporary housing. The shelter can accommodate you for up to 90 days while we work on long-term solutions. Brian answered her questions. Name, age, social security number, employment history, current situation. Sophie's information. Medical needs. Dietary restrictions. Emergency contacts. The forms seemed endless, but Nicole made it easy. She asked questions gently, never pushing, always validating. I see you have no current address, Nicole noted. Where were you planning to sleep tonight before James found you? Brian hesitated. The park? Probably. Or under an overpass. Somewhere Sophie would be safe from weather. Nicole did not react with shock or pity. She simply nodded and made notes. You will have a room tonight. Private space with a bed, a crib we can bring in, a bathroom. There is a shared kitchen where you can store the groceries James bought. Common areas where Sophie can play. Security on site 24/7. And tomorrow we will start connecting you with other services. What kind of services? Brian asked. food assistance programs, medical care, child care subsidies once you start working, legal aid if you need help with any custody or divorce paperwork, Nicole listed. We will also connect you with job training resources, though it sounds like James already has that covered. She smiled at James, who had been sitting quietly in the corner. You have a good advocate in Mr. Harrison. He does a lot for families in our community. I just try to help where I can, James said. Nicole turned back to Brian. The shelter has rules. No alcohol or drugs on premises. Curfew at 10 p.m. unless you are working. Participation in case management meetings. Respectful behavior toward staff and other residents. Can you agree to those terms? Absolutely, Brian said. Good. Nicole gathered the paperwork. Let me show you to your room. James, thank you for calling me. And for bringing Brian here. Thank you for meeting us so late, James replied. They walked through more hallways until Nicole stopped at a door with the number 7 on it. She unlocked it and flipped on the light. The room was simple but clean. A double bed with fresh linens. A small dresser. A wooden chair. A window with curtains. A door leading to a private bathroom. After sleeping in his car and contemplating park benches, it looked like luxury to Brian. I will have someone bring a crib for Sophie, Nicole said. And here is a key. Your room. Your space. Make yourself comfortable. Brian walked inside, still holding Sophie. He laid her gently on the bed, surrounding her with pillows so she would not roll off. She did not stay. Exhaustion had claimed her completely. James set the grocery bags from Save Mart inside the door. I will pick you up tomorrow morning at 9. We will go to my office and get the paperwork started. Bring Sophie. We have a daycare center in the building. You can tour it and get her enrolled. Okay, Brian said. Thank you. For everything. James paused at the door. Brian, can I ask you something? Sure. In that store, when you realized you did not have enough money, why were you putting the diapers back? Why not just walk out with them? Brian frowned. That would be stealing. You had no money, no home, no food. Your daughter needed diapers. Most people would have justified taking them. Maybe, Brian acknowledged. But I do not want Sophie growing up thinking desperation excuses wrong choices. I want to teach her that character matters even when life is hard. Especially when life is hard. James nodded slowly. That is why I hired you. That right there. You could have taken the easy path. You did not. That tells me everything I need to know about who you are. After James and Nicole left, Brian sat on the edge of the bed and watched Sophie sleep. Her chest rose and fell with steady breaths. Her tiny fist curled near her mouth. She looked peaceful, safe, loved. Brian thought about the past 6 hours. The terror of standing in that checkout line with his last dollar. The stranger who appeared with impossible generosity. The job offer. The housing. The help. It felt like a dream. Like something that happened in movies, not real life. Real life was hard. Real life was struggle. Real life was people walking past suffering without stopping. But James had stopped. He had seen. He had helped. Maybe, Brian thought, real life could surprise you sometimes. Maybe kindness was not dead. Maybe hope was not foolish. Maybe second chances actually existed. He laid down next to Sophie, careful not to wake her. The bed felt soft beneath him. The room smelled clean. The walls provided shelter from the world outside. For the first time in months, Brian closed his eyes and slept without fear. Morning light filtered through the curtains when Brian woke. For a confused moment, he forgot where he was. Then memory returned. The church. The shelter. James. Safety. Sophie was awake, sitting up and looking around the unfamiliar room with curious eyes. She saw Brian and smiled, pointing at the window where birds chirped outside. Good morning, baby girl, Brian said, picking her up. Let's get you changed and fed. He used the bathroom to wash up, grateful for running water and basic hygiene after days of using public restrooms. Sophie needed a bath badly. Her clothes were stained and her hair was tangled. But first, breakfast. The shared kitchen was down the hall. 2 other families were there when Brian entered. A woman with 3 young children sat at the table feeding them cereal. A older man poured coffee. They nodded at Brian but did not pry. Everyone here understood the unspoken rule. You did not ask about circumstances. You just coexisted. Brian found the groceries James had bought in the refrigerator, labeled with his room number. He made Sophie a bottle and gave her some crackers. For himself, he toasted bread and spread peanut butter on it. Simple. But it was food. Real food. That was enough. At 8:45, he dressed Sophie in the cleanest outfit from their bags. It was still wrinkled and too small, but it would have to do. He combed his own hair with his fingers and tried to look presentable. First impressions mattered. Even when someone already saved your life, you still wanted to prove you were worth the investment. James arrived at 9 exactly. He wore another expensive suit, this time navy blue. But he smiled when he saw them and immediately crouched to Sophie's level. "Good morning, Sophie," he said. "Ready for an adventure?" Sophie giggled and reached for his tie again. James let her grab it. They drove to a modern glass building in downtown Austin. Harrison Tech Solutions occupied floors 8 through 12. The lobby gleamed with polished marble and contemporary art. Everyone who passed greeted James warmly. He was clearly well-liked. The elevator took them to the 10th floor. James led Brian through an open office space where employees worked at computers. Some looked up and waved. James introduced Brian to several people, explaining he was the new facility manager. People welcomed him genuinely. "Our old facility manager, Chuck, retired last month," James explained. "He worked here for 15 years. Did a great job keeping everything running smoothly. I have been managing things myself in the interim, but I need someone dedicated to it. That is where you come in." They stopped at an office with James's name on the door. Inside, a woman in her 30s with red hair and glasses sat at a desk just outside the main office. She stood when they entered. "Brian, this is Beth Patterson, my assistant," James said. "Beth, Brian Mitchell, and his daughter Sophie." "Hi, Brian," Beth said warmly. "James told me about you. Welcome to the team." "Thank you," Brian replied. "Beth is going to handle your onboarding paperwork while I give Sophie a tour of the daycare," James said. "Sound good?" Brian hesitated. "Are you sure you do not mind?" "I insist," James said, already holding his arms out to Sophie. She went to him easily, comfortable with this man who had shown them such unexpected kindness. Beth led Brian into a small conference room and pulled out a stack of forms. Employment application, tax forms, direct deposit information, insurance selection, emergency contacts. Brian filled everything out carefully, his handwriting neater than usual because he wanted everything to be perfect. "The health insurance kicks in after 30 days, Beth explained. "But James instructed me to set you up with immediate access to our employee assistance program. That includes the child case subsidy I mentioned." She slid another form across the table. "Our daycare center is on the 2nd floor. State licensed. Excellent staff. For employees, the cost is reduced by 60%. That makes it about $300 a month instead of $800. The subsidy program can cover up to half of that if you qualify based on income. I will help you apply." $300. That was manageable on $4,000 to $5,000 a year. Brian felt the knot in his chest loosen slightly. "When can I start?" he asked. "James said you can start Monday," Beth replied. "That gives you the rest of the week to get settled. Get Sophie enrolled in daycare. Set up your housing situation. Catch your breath." "But I need to work," Brian protested. "I need money." "James is paying you starting today," Beth said gently. "Full salary. Consider the rest of this week training and orientation." Brian stared at her. "He is paying me before I even start working." "He does things like this," Beth said with a smile. "He is a good man. Lost his family and turned his grief into purpose. He helps people. Quietly. Generously. You are not the first person he has pulled out of a difficult situation. And you will not be the last." James returned 20 minutes later with Sophie. She was laughing, her face lit up with joy. "The daycare center has a ball pit," James announced. "She loved it. I think we found her happy place." "I can enroll her?" Brian asked. "Already done," James said. "The director, Mrs. Chen, said Sophie can start Monday." We will waive the registration fee. Just bring her vaccination records, and we are set. Brian felt overwhelmed. This is too much. Stop saying that, James said, but his tone was kind. Accept help gracefully. It is a gift to both of us. Over the next few hours, James showed Brian around the building, the mechanical systems, the security protocols, the cleaning schedules, the vendor relationships. It was a lot of information, but Brian absorbed it eagerly. This was his chance, his way back. He would not waste it. During lunch, which James insisted on buying, they sat in the company cafeteria. Sophie munched on soft vegetables while Brian ate a real meal for the second time in days. Nicole called me this morning, James said. She wants to meet with you tomorrow to discuss housing options beyond the shelter. There are some transitional housing programs that might work better long-term. How long can I stay at the shelter? Brian asked. 90 days, James replied. But Nicole thinks she can get you into a subsidized apartment within a month if we play our cards right. Once you have steady income and stable housing, everything else falls into place. What about legal stuff with Sophie? Brian asked. My wife left. I have no custody agreement. What if she comes back? Nicole can help with that too, James said. Get you connected with family law services. Establish legal custody. Make sure Sophie is protected. He took a sip of coffee. But Brian, I have to ask. Do you think your wife will come back? Brian considered the question. I do not know. Part of me hopes she does. Not for me, but for Sophie. Every kid deserves a mother. But another part of me knows that if she could walk away from a 3-month-old baby, she is not coming back. People who leave like that do not change their minds. I am sorry, James said. Me too, Brian replied. But I have Sophie. And right now, I have you. And I have this opportunity. That is more than I had yesterday. After lunch, James drove them back to the shelter. He walked them to the room and helped Brian carry in some additional supplies he had picked up during lunch. Toys for Sophie. A few changes of clothes. Basic toiletries. I will see you Monday morning, James said at the door. 8:30. Bring Sophie and I will help you get her settled in daycare before we start your first official day. James, Brian said, stopping him before he left. Why are you doing this? Really? James looked at Sophie, then at Brian. Because 5 years ago, I learned that money means nothing if you do not have someone to share it with. I can buy anything I want, but I cannot buy back my wife and daughter. So I use what I have to help people who need it. It gives me purpose. It helps me feel less alone. He smiled sadly. You are helping me as much as I am helping you, Brian. Maybe more. After James left, Brian sat on the bed with Sophie. She played with a new stuffed animal James had bought, making it hop across the blanket. Brian watched her, his heart full of emotions he could not name. Gratitude, relief, hope, fear, all mixed together in a confusing swirl. Tomorrow, he would meet with Nicole again. Monday, he would start working. Slowly, piece by piece, he would rebuild their lives. But for tonight, he just held his daughter and let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, everything would be okay. The next morning, Brian met with Nicole in her office at the church. Sophie sat on the floor, playing with blocks, while they discussed housing options. I have good news, Nicole said. There is a transitional housing program through the county called Path Forward. It is designed for working families. Furnished apartments at 30% of your income. Case management support. Job retention services. Childcare assistance. She slid a brochure across the desk. The waiting list is usually 6 months. But I talked to the program director. She owes me a favor. She can get you in within 3 weeks if we move fast. 3 weeks. Brian could hardly believe it. That is amazing. It gets better, Nicole continued. The apartments are in a good neighborhood near Sophie's future school. There is a park nearby, public transportation access, and the program helps residents transition to market-rate housing after 18 months. It is designed to be a stepping stone, not a permanent solution. Brian felt his eyes burn with grateful tears. I do not know how to thank you. Thank me by succeeding, Nicole said simply. Take advantage of every resource offered. Show up. Work hard. Be the father Sophie deserves. That is all the thanks I need. She handed him more paperwork. I also need you to establish legal custody of Sophie. Your wife abandoned her. You need documentation that proves you are the legal guardian. Otherwise, you could run into problems with school enrollment, medical decisions, things like that. How do I do that? Brian asked. I connected you with a family law attorney who does pro bono work for our shelter clients, Nicole explained. Her name is Rachel Montgomery. She will help you file the paperwork. It should be straightforward since Jennifer has been gone for months with no contact. That afternoon, Brian met with Rachel in her office. She was a sharp woman in her 50s who listened carefully as Brian explained his situation. She took notes and asked questions about Jennifer's departure, his efforts to find her, and his care of Sophie. This is a clear case of abandonment, Rachel said. We will file for sole legal and physical custody. I will also petition to have your rights protected in case Jennifer ever returns. The court will likely grant your request quickly given the circumstances. What if she comes back and wants Sophie? Brian asked, voicing his deepest fear. Then we fight, Rachel said firmly. You have been the primary caregiver for over a year. You have provided stability and love. The court prioritizes the child's best interest. And right now, her best interest is staying with you. Brian felt relief wash over him. Sophie would be protected, legally recognized as his. No matter what happened, she was his daughter. Word of Brian's situation spread through Harrison Tech Solutions faster than he expected. When he arrived Monday morning for his first day of work, several employees approached him with offers of help. A woman named Susan from accounting brought a bag of clothes her son had outgrown. These should fit Sophie, she said. I have been meaning to donate them anyway. A man from IT named Tom handed Brian a gift card to Target. From me and a few other guys on the team, he explained. Get yourself and Sophie whatever you need. Beth had organized a collection among staff. She presented Brian with an envelope containing $800 in cash. We wanted to help, she said. No pressure to accept it. But we wanted you to know we care. Brian stood in the lobby surrounded by these kind strangers and felt emotion overwhelm him. I do not deserve this. Yes, you do, Beth said. You are part of our team now. We take care of each other. James appeared and saw what was happening. He smiled. I told you. Good people work here. And they like helping when they see someone trying. The generosity continued throughout the week. A couple from James's church dropped off furniture for when Brian moved into his apartment. Tables, chairs, dishes, blankets. Everything a home needed. Pastor Tom Bradley visited Brian at the shelter and invited him to attend services. No pressure, the pastor said. But we have a young families group that meets Wednesday nights. Might be good for you and Sophie. Community matters. Brian took him up on the offer. That Wednesday, he nervously carried Sophie into the church fellowship hall, where a dozen parents sat in a circle while their children played in a supervised area. Everyone welcomed him warmly. A woman named Julie sat next to him. Single parent, she asked. Yes, Brian admitted. Me too, Julie said. Divorced 2 years ago. Raising 3 kids on a teacher's salary. It is hard. But we help each other here. Babysitting swaps. Meal sharing. Emotional support. You are not alone anymore. Brian felt his throat tighten. Thank you. Over the following weeks, Brian settled into his new job. The work was exactly what he needed. Physical enough to feel productive. Varied enough to stay interesting. Important enough to matter. He fixed leaker faucets, coordinated with cleaning crews, managed vendor schedules, and kept the building running smoothly. His co-workers became friends. They invited him to lunch. Asked about Sophie. Shared parenting advice. Celebrated small victories with him. Sophie thrived in the daycare center. She made friends. Learned new words. Developed routines. Her pediatrician, Dr. Susan Crawford, said she was hitting all her developmental milestones despite the rough start to her young life. You are doing a great job, Dr. Crawford told Brian during a checkup. She is healthy, happy, and clearly loved. That is what matters. Brian moved into the transitional apartment 3 weeks after meeting Nicole, exactly as promised. The one-bedroom unit was small but clean. Furniture from the church filled the space. Dishes from co-workers stocked the cabinets. Toys from James covered the living room floor. It was not much, but it was home. Theirs. Safe. Stable. James helped Brian move in, along with Tom from work and Pastor Bradley. They carried furniture up 3 flights of stairs, assembled Sophie's toddler bed, and hung curtains. Afterward, they ordered pizza and sat in the small living room eating and talking. "You have come a long way in a month," Pastor Bradley observed. "Thanks to all of you," Brian said. "No," James corrected. "Thanks to you. You did the hard part. You showed up. You worked hard. You accepted help when it was offered. Those are not easy things to do." That night, after everyone left, Brian tucked Sophie into her new bed. She looked tiny in the unfamiliar space, but she clutched her stuffed rabbit and smiled up at him. "We are okay now," Brian whispered to her. "We are going to be okay." As he turned out the light and walked to his own bed in the next room, Brian thought about the past month. From standing in that checkout line with $1 to having a job, a home, friends, and hope. It felt like a miracle. But James was right. It was not a miracle. It was what happened when good people chose kindness over indifference. When community rallied around those in need. When second chances were given freely. Brian had spent so long believing he had to survive alone. That asking for help was weakness. That accepting generosity was shameful. But now he understood. Strength was not refusing help. Strength was having the courage to accept it. Strength was letting people see your struggle and trusting them with your vulnerability. He had been given so much. Now it was his turn to figure out how to give back. How to pass on the kindness that had saved him. That thought followed him into sleep. And for the first time in over a year, he dreamed not of falling but of flying. 3 months into his job at Harrison Tech Solutions, Brian had settled into a rhythm. He woke at 6 each morning, got Sophie ready, and arrived at the office by 7:30. He dropped Sophie at the daycare center, where she now ran eagerly to her teachers and friends. Then he spent his days maintaining the building, solving problems, and proving himself valuable. His first paycheck felt surreal. Actual money, deposited directly into a bank account James helped him open. Enough to pay his portion of rent, buy groceries, start saving. He remembered staring at the balance on his phone, tears streaming down his face. Security. That is what money meant now. Not luxury. Not status. Just the basic human need for security. James became more than a boss. He became a mentor and friend. They had lunch together twice a week, during which James taught Brian about financial planning, career development, and long-term thinking. Brian soaked up the advice like a sponge. "You are smart," James told him one afternoon. "You learn fast. You see problems and find solutions. Do not limit yourself to facility management. Think bigger." "Like what?" Brian asked. "I do not know yet," James admitted. "But I see potential in you. Give yourself time to discover what you are truly capable of." Brian continued attending the Wednesday night group at church. The connections he made there became crucial to his sense of belonging. Julie, the single mother he met first, became a close friend. They arranged playdates for their kids. Shared meals. Vented about the challenges of solo parenting. "You are different than most single dads I meet," Julie observed one evening while their children played at the park. "How so?" Brian asked. "You are present," she said. "Really present. Not just going through the motions. Sophie is lucky to have you." Brian watched Sophie on the swings, her laughter carrying across the playground. "I am the lucky one." As fall turned to winter, Brian established new traditions. Saturday mornings at the library for story time. Sunday afternoons at the park. Friday pizza nights. Simple rituals that gave Sophie structure and filled their lives with small joys. Dr. Crawford continued to monitor Sophie's development. At her 18-month checkup, the pediatrician smiled widely. "She is thriving, Brian. Her language skills are excellent. Her motor development is right on track. Whatever you are doing, keep doing it." Brian felt pride swell in his chest. Despite everything they had been through, Sophie was okay. Better than okay. She was happy. Work brought new responsibilities. James asked Brian to oversee a renovation project for the 6th floor. It was Brian's first major project management role. He coordinated contractors, managed timelines, stayed under budget. When the project finished ahead of schedule and below cost, James publicly praised his work at a company meeting. Brian joined us 4 months ago, James told the assembled employees. Since then, he has proven himself invaluable. He solved problems we did not even know we had. He saved the company money. He made this building better. Let us give him the recognition he deserves. The applause made Brian uncomfortable. He was not used to praise. But he also felt something new stirring inside him. Pride. Not arrogance. Just healthy, earned pride in his work and growth. Beth approached him after the meeting. James is planning to create an assistant facility manager position. He wants to hire someone to work under you. Interested? He wants me to manage someone. Brian asked, surprised. You have proven you can handle it, Beth said. Think about it. That night, Brian called his sponsor from the church's financial counseling program, a man named Robert. They had been working together to repair Brian's credit and establish good financial habits. I got offered a promotion, Brian told him. Sort of. They want to create a position under me. That is excellent, Robert said. What are you concerned about? That I am not ready, Brian admitted. That I will mess up. That I do not deserve it. Those are normal fears, Robert replied. But let me ask you something. 4 months ago, did you think you would have a job, an apartment, and a healthy daughter? No, Brian admitted. But you do. Because you took chances when they were offered. You trusted people who wanted to help. You worked hard. This is no different. Trust yourself the way James trusts you. Brian accepted the expanded role. He helped interview candidates for the assistant position and eventually hired a young man named Danny fresh out of trade school. Training Danny reminded Brian how much he had learned in such a short time. You are good at this, Danny observed one afternoon while Brian showed him the building's electrical systems. Have you thought about getting certified? Maybe moving into project management full-time. I have a high school diploma, Brian said. So? You can take classes. Community college. Online programs. You are smart enough. The seed planted itself in Brian's mind. Could he go back to school? At 32 with a toddler? It seemed impossible. But then again, everything about the past 4 months had seemed impossible. He mentioned the idea to James during their next lunch. I think that is a great idea, James said immediately. What would you study? Maybe construction management? Or business administration? Something practical. The company has a tuition reimbursement program, James said. We will pay for half your tuition if you maintain a B average. I will personally cover the other half as a bonus. No strings attached. Brian stared at him. You would do that? Brian, I invested in you because I saw potential. Let me continue that investment. Get educated. Grow. Become everything you are capable of becoming. That night, Brian researched programs at Austin Community College. He found a 2-year associate degree in business management that offered evening and online classes. Perfect for working parents. He filled out the application sitting at his small kitchen table while Sophie slept in the next room. When he hit submit, he felt terror and excitement in equal measure. What if he failed? What if he was not smart enough? What if he was reaching too far? But then he remembered standing in that Save Mart checkout line with his last dollar. He remembered James saying, I will take them all. He remembered every act of kindness that brought him to this moment. If people believed in him enough to help, he could believe in himself enough to try. The acceptance letter arrived 2 weeks later. He started classes in January. 2 nights a week plus online coursework. It was hard balancing work, parenting, and school. But Julie helped with babysitting. James was flexible with his schedule. His church community rallied with meal trains on school nights. Sophie adjusted to the new routine. She learned that some nights Daddy had homework just like she would someday. They studied together at the kitchen table, Sophie with her coloring books and Brian with his textbooks. Daddy learn? Sophie asked one evening, pointing at his laptop. Yes, baby, Brian said. Daddy is learning. Just like you. She smiled and went back to her coloring, content with the answer. By spring, Brian had completed his first semester with straight A's. James framed his report card and hung it in the office, much to Brian's embarrassment. But secretly, he was proud. He was building something. Not just a career. Not just a life. He was building a future. For himself and Sophie. And it started because one man in a grocery store chose kindness over convenience. One man saw suffering and decided to act. Brian thought about that often. About the ripple effect of generosity. How one moment of compassion could change entire lives. He wanted to be that person for someone else someday. He wanted to pay forward what had been given to him. That became his new goal. Not just survival. Not just success. But service. Using what he learned and earned to help others climb out of their own desperate situations. Because he knew now what he did not know 6 months ago. Hope was not foolish. Kindness was not weakness. Second chances were real. And sometimes, the best thing you could say to someone drowning was not swim harder, but let me help you float. 8 months after James found Brian in that Save Mart checkout line, Brian volunteered for the first time at the church food pantry. Pastor Bradley had mentioned they needed help on Saturday mornings, and Brian finally felt stable enough to give time instead of just receive. The pantry operated in the church basement. Families came through twice a month to collect groceries. Volunteers sorted donations, stocked shelves, and helped people shop with dignity rather than desperation. Brian recognized the look in people's eyes. The shame mixed with gratitude. The exhaustion of endless struggle. The hope that maybe this time things would get better. He had worn that same look 6 months ago. "You are good with people," Pastor Bradley observed as Brian helped a young mother select items for her children. Patient. Understanding. No judgment. "I have been where they are," Brian replied simply. His volunteer work became a regular part of his routine. Every other Saturday, he brought Sophie with him. She played in the church nursery while Brian worked. Gradually, he started sharing his story with people who seemed particularly broken. "I was homeless 8 months ago," he told a man who looked ready to give up. "Living in my car with my baby daughter. Then someone helped me. Someone I did not even know. He gave me a job and a second chance. Things can change. They really can." Sometimes people believed him. Sometimes they did not. But he kept showing up. Kept offering hope. Kept demonstrating that kindness was real and change was possible. James expanded his company's charitable initiatives, inspired by Brian's story and determination. He established a hiring program for people experiencing homelessness or recent incarceration. He partnered with shelters to provide job training. He created a fund to help employees facing financial emergencies. "You started this," James told Brian one afternoon in his office. "Your story reminded me why I have money. Not to accumulate more, but to use it for good." "I just accepted the help you offered," Brian said. "And that was brave," James countered. "Most people are too proud. But you let me help. And now look at us. Creating systems to help others. You multiplied my initial investment 100-fold." At his Wednesday night group, Brian became known as the encourager. When new people showed up looking lost and broken, the regulars directed them to Brian. "Talk to him," they said. "He understands." A single mother named Christina broke down crying one evening describing her situation. Domestic violence. Unemployment. 3 kids. No family support. Brian listened without interruption. Then he shared his own story. The abandonment. The poverty. The $1. The stranger who appeared like an answer to prayers. He stopped praying. "It gets better," Brian promised her. "Not all at once. Not easily. But if you let people help and you keep trying, it gets better." He connected Christina with Nicole at Family Services. Within 2 weeks, she had safe housing and a job interview. A month later, she was working and her kids were thriving. "You saved my life," she told Brian. "No," he corrected gently. "I just pointed you toward the people who could help. You did the hard work of accepting that help and making changes. That was all you." Sophie turned 2 in December. Brian threw her a party at their apartment, inviting his co-workers, church friends, and neighbors. The small space overflowed with people who had become family. James arrived with an enormous present. a play kitchen set that Sophie immediately loved. But he also pulled Brian aside and handed him an envelope. "What is this?" Brian asked. "Open it." Inside was a letter from the company's board of directors. Promotion to facilities director. Salary increase to $60,000. Annual bonus eligibility. Expanded responsibilities. "You earned this," James said. "Your work has been exceptional. You managed the building better than Chuck ever did. You trained Danny well. You saved the company money while improving quality. This is merit-based, not charity." Brian felt tears threaten. "I do not know what to say." "Say you will keep being exactly who you are," James replied. "Hard-working, honest, kind. That is all I ask." At the party, Pastor Bradley led everyone in singing Happy Birthday to Sophie. She blew out her candles with Brian's help, her face glowing with joy. Brian looked around at the crowded apartment and felt overwhelming gratitude. A year ago, he had nothing. Now he had everything that mattered. His second semester of college went even better than the first. He maintained his straight A average while working full-time and raising Sophie. His professors commented on his dedication and maturity. One encouraged him to consider transferring to a four-year university eventually. "You could get your bachelor's degree," she said. "Maybe even your master's. You have the intelligence and work ethic. Do not limit yourself." Brian had never imagined himself with a college degree. But now the possibility seemed real. Distant, but real. Julie from church became one of his closest friends. They attended community events together with their kids, shared holidays, supported each other through parenting challenges. "Are you dating anyone?" she asked him one evening while their children played. Brian shook his head. "I am not ready for that. Maybe someday. But right now, Sophie is my priority." "I get it," Julie said. "Just want you to know you deserve happiness. All kinds of happiness." "I am happy," Brian said honestly. "I have my daughter, my job, my friends, my education. That is enough." And it was. For now. At work, Brian implemented new systems that improved efficiency. He negotiated better contracts with vendors, saving the company significant money. He trained Danny so well that the younger man was ready for more responsibilities. James noticed everything. "You are wasted in facilities management," he told Brian one day. "Have you thought about operations? Project management? You could go far in this company." "I like what I do," Brian said. "I know," James replied. "But challenge yourself. Keep growing. That is how you honor the second chance you were given. By becoming everything you are capable of being." Brian thought about that conversation for days. He was comfortable now. Stable. Safe. But maybe comfort was not the goal. Maybe the goal was continued growth. Continued service. Continued learning. He started thinking about what came next. Not just for himself, but for Sophie. What kind of future could he build for her? What opportunities could he create? Those questions drove him forward. Through late-night studying. Through challenging work projects. Through moments of doubt. He remembered the feeling of standing in that checkout line with his last dollar. The desperation. The fear. The certainty that he had failed his daughter. He never wanted to feel that way again. And he never wanted Sophie to experience the instability he had put her through. So he kept working. Kept learning. Kept growing. And most importantly, kept finding ways to help others climb out of their own desperate situations. Because he had learned the most important lesson of all. Kindness multiplied. One act of generosity created ripples that spread farther than anyone could imagine. James had saved him. Brian was saving others. Those others would save more. On and on. An endless chain of compassion connecting broken people and giving them reasons to keep trying. That, Brian thought, was what life was supposed to be about. Not accumulating wealth or status, but lifting each other up. Creating community. Choosing love over indifference. It sounded simple. It was anything but it was worth every effort. Subscribe and stay with us to see what happens next in Brian's journey. Will his past come back to haunt him? Will he be able to protect Sophie? What challenges lie ahead? Your support means everything. The letter arrived on a Tuesday morning in March. Brian pulled it from his mailbox, noting the return address. A law firm in Dallas he did not recognize. His stomach clenched as he opened the envelope. Inside, legal documents. Custody petition. Jennifer Mitchell seeking joint custody of Sophie Mitchell. Scheduled hearing in 30 days. Brian's hands trembled as he read the words. Jennifer. After 18 months of silence. After abandoning Sophie when she was 3 months old. After leaving Brian to struggle alone through homelessness and desperation. Now she wanted custody. He sat on his apartment steps, unable to move. Sophie played inside, laughing at something on her educational tablet. Completely unaware that her entire world might be about to change. Brian called Rachel Montgomery, the family attorney who had helped him establish legal custody a year ago. She answered on the second ring. Brian, hi. What can I do for you? Jennifer filed for custody, he said, his voice hollow. She wants joint custody. Rachel was quiet for a moment. Send me the documents. I will review them, and we will talk. Can you come to my office tomorrow? Yes, Brian managed. Brian, breathe. We expected this might happen eventually. We have been preparing for it. You have a strong case. You have been Sophie's primary caregiver for 18 months. You have stable housing, employment, community support. Jennifer abandoned her. The court will see that. But what if they did not? What if a judge decided Sophie needed her mother despite everything? What if he lost her? Brian could not breathe. The panic attack hit him hard. He called James. I need help, he said when James answered. Where are you? Home. I am coming over. James arrived 15 minutes later. He found Brian still sitting on the steps, the legal documents scattered around him. He sat down beside Brian without speaking. Just present. Just there. Jennifer wants Sophie, Brian finally said. James picked up the documents and read them. His jaw tightened. Where has she been for 18 months? I do not know. Then we find out, James said firmly. We document every day you have cared for Sophie alone. Every doctor visit. Every daycare payment. Every night you rocked her to sleep. Every sacrifice you made. We show the court who has actually been her parent. He pulled out his phone. I am calling my attorney, corporate lawyer, but he will know who to refer us to. If Rachel is not enough, we get additional support. We fight this with everything we have. Brian looked at his friend. I cannot afford multiple attorneys. You are not paying, James said. I am. And before you argue, remember that Sophie is important to me too. I have watched you raise her. I have seen you become an incredible father. I will not let her be taken from you because you cannot afford legal fees. That is not how this ends. Over the next week, Brian met with Rachel twice. They built their case carefully. Medical records showing Brian taking Sophie to every checkup. Daycare records proving consistent care and payment. Work evaluations demonstrating stability. Character references from co-workers, church members, neighbors. Nicole from Family Services wrote a detailed report about Brian's journey from homelessness to stability. She documented his housing history, employment records, and participation in support programs. She included observations about his parenting and Sophie's well-being. Pastor Bradley wrote a letter describing Brian's character and commitment. Julie and other parents from church provided statements. Even Dr. Crawford, Sophie's pediatrician, submitted a detailed assessment of Sophie's development and Brian's parenting. James hired an investigator to find information about Jennifer. What emerged was disturbing. After leaving, she had moved to Dallas with a new boyfriend. That relationship ended badly. She spent 6 months unemployed, living with various friends. Recently, she got engaged to a man with money. Now she wanted to play mother again. She wants respectability, the investigator reported. The new fiancé has a conservative family. They expect him to marry someone with a child from a previous relationship. She is trying to look like a responsible parent to impress them. Brian felt sick. Sophie was not a prop for Jennifer to use to improve her image. Rachel filed a response arguing that sole custody should remain with Brian. She detailed Jennifer's abandonment, lack of financial support, and absence from Sophie's life. She requested that if any visitation was granted, it be supervised and limited. The stress took its toll on Brian. He lost weight, had trouble sleeping, struggled to focus at work. James noticed and called him into his office. "Take time off," James said. "Paid leave. Focus on the custody case. Danny can handle your responsibilities temporarily." "I need to work," Brian protested. "I need to show stability." "You are spiraling," James said gently. "I can see it. Taking care of yourself is part of stability. Take 2 weeks. Prepare for court. Spend time with Sophie. Get your head right." Brian reluctantly agreed. He used the time to organize every document Rachel requested. He also spent hours with Sophie, memorizing every detail of her face, her laugh, her personality. Just in case. The Wednesday night church group rallied around him. They prayed. They offered babysitting. They brought meals. They reminded him he was not alone in this fight. "God does not bring you this far to abandon you now," Pastor Bradley said. "Trust that truth matters. Trust that love matters. Trust that judges see through manipulation." Julie hugged him after Group 1 evening. "Sophie belongs with you. Everyone knows that. The court will know it too." But Brian was not sure. He had seen too many times when the system failed. When biological connections mattered more than actual care. When appearances trumped reality. As the hearing date approached, his anxiety intensified. He barely ate, barely slept, checked on Sophie constantly during the night, terrified each morning might be his last with her. Rachel prepared him for court. What to wear, how to speak, what questions to expect, how to remain calm under Jennifer's attorney's cross-examination. "Tell the truth," she coached. "Stay factual. Show emotion when appropriate, but do not get angry. Let your love for Sophie show through every word." The night before the hearing, James came over with dinner. They sat on the apartment floor playing with Sophie while she ate chicken nuggets. "Whatever happens tomorrow, you have been an amazing father," James said. "You gave Sophie stability when she had none. You loved her when you had every reason to give up. That matters. That will always matter." "What if I lose her?" Brian whispered. "Then we appeal," James said firmly. "And we keep fighting until we win." "But Brian, you are not going to lose her. The evidence is overwhelming. You have been her parent in every way that matters." After James left, Brian held Sophie close. She was tired, her small body heavy in his arms. She tucked her head against his shoulder, completely trusting, completely loved. "I am sorry, baby girl," he whispered. "I am sorry your mom left. I am sorry you have to go through this. But I promise, no matter what happens, you are loved. You are wanted. You are worth fighting for." Sophie yawned and patted his cheek. "Dada," she said sleepily. "Love Dada." Brian closed his eyes, tears streaming down his face. "Love you too, Sophie. More than anything in this world." He tucked her into bed and watched her sleep for a long time, memorizing every detail, storing memories in case tomorrow changed everything. Then he went to his own room and prayed for the first time in years. Not begging, not bargaining, just honest, desperate prayer. "Please let me keep her. Please let justice mean something. Please let love be enough." Outside his window, the city lights glowed against the dark sky. Somewhere out there, Jennifer slept peacefully, probably not thinking about the daughter she abandoned or the father she was trying to hurt. But Brian was thinking, planning, preparing to fight with everything he had. Tomorrow would determine their future. Tomorrow a judge would decide if biological ties mattered more than actual care. Tomorrow would test whether the system protected children or just maintained appearances. Brian did not sleep that night. He sat in Sophie's doorway, watching her breathe, and waited for morning to come. The Travis County Courthouse loomed above them, all glass and steel and imposing architecture. Brian held Sophie's hand as they climbed the steps. Rachel walked beside them, carrying a briefcase full of documents that told the story of the past 18 months. James met them at the entrance. He wore his most formal suit and a determined expression. "Ready?" "No," Brian admitted. "But let us do this anyway." They went through security and rode the elevator to the family court floor. The hallway was crowded with other families waiting for their own hearings. Anxious faces, tense conversations, The smell of desperation hung in the air. Rachel led them to a bench outside courtroom 3. The hearing is scheduled for 10. Judge Patricia Morrison presiding. She is fair but tough. She will want to hear from both sides. Stay calm. Answer truthfully. Trust the evidence. At 9:50, Jennifer arrived. Brian saw her before she saw him. She looked different than he remembered. Her hair was styled expensively. She wore a conservative dress and heels. Makeup perfect. Everything calculated to make her look respectable and maternal. A man in his 50s walked beside her. Expensive suit. Confident stride. Must be the fiancé. Behind them, a sharp-looking attorney in a power suit. Jennifer finally noticed Brian. Their eyes met across the hallway. He saw something flicker in her face. Guilt? Regret? Or just annoyance that he existed? He could not tell. Sophie noticed her too. She stared at the stranger, confused. She did not recognize the woman who gave birth to her. How could she? Jennifer had been gone for more than half of Sophie's life. Is that Mama? Sophie whispered to Brian. His heart broke. Yes, baby. That is your birth mother. Jennifer started to approach, but her attorney stopped her. Smart move. Any interaction before court could be used as evidence. At 10 o'clock exactly, the bailiff called them into the courtroom. Judge Morrison sat behind the bench, a woman in her 60s with steel gray hair and sharp eyes that missed nothing. This is a custody hearing regarding Sophie Mitchell, age 2, the judge said after everyone was seated. Petitioner Jennifer Mitchell seeks joint legal and physical custody. Respondent Brian Mitchell seeks to maintain sole custody. I have reviewed the submitted documents from both parties. We will hear testimony from both parents today. Mrs. Mitchell, you are the petitioner, so we will start with you. Jennifer took the witness stand. Her attorney, a man named Douglas Brennan, began questioning her. Mrs. Mitchell, can you explain why you left your daughter when she was 3 months old? Jennifer's eyes filled with tears. Right on cue, Brian thought cynically. I was suffering from severe postpartum depression, she said, her voice shaking. I was not myself. I was having dark thoughts. I was afraid I would hurt Sophie or myself. I thought leaving was the right thing to do. I thought I was protecting her. Did you seek help for these mental health issues? Brennan asked. Eventually, yes, Jennifer replied. I saw a therapist. I got on medication. I did the work to get better. But by the time I was stable again, so much time had passed. I was ashamed. I did not know how to reach out. I did not think Brian would want to hear from me. Why are you seeking custody now? Because I am better now, Jennifer said. I am engaged to a wonderful man. We are building a stable life together. I have a good job. I am ready to be the mother Sophie deserves. I made a terrible mistake, but I want to make it right. Rachel cross-examined Jennifer, and the facade started to crack. You claim you were experiencing postpartum depression. Did you see a doctor about this condition while you were still living with Brian and Sophie? No, Jennifer admitted. Did you tell Brian you were experiencing these symptoms? No. Did you leave a note explaining your mental state when you left? No. In fact, you left no explanation at all, correct? Correct. During the 18 months you were gone, how many times did you contact Brian to check on Sophie? Jennifer hesitated. I did not contact him. Not once. No. How many times did you send money to support Sophie's care? I did not send money. I was not working steadily. Yet you had money to move to Dallas? Money to support yourself. I was staying with friends mostly. Did you attempt to find out if Sophie was okay? Healthy? Safe? I assumed Brian was taking care of her. You assumed. But you did not verify. For 18 months, you had no contact with your daughter. No knowledge of her well-being. No contribution to her support. Is that accurate? Yes, Jennifer said quietly. Rachel continued. According to court records, your new fiancé, Mr. Thomas Patterson, comes from a prominent Dallas family. Is that correct? Yes. And his family has certain expectations about appropriate family structure. Jennifer's attorney objected. Relevance. Goes to motivation, Rachel countered. Judge Morrison allowed it. Answer the question. His family is traditional, yes, Jennifer said. In fact, they expect him to marry someone who is an established parent, correct? Someone who can demonstrate maternal qualities. I do not know what they expect. But you know that showing up with a child would make you more acceptable to them, would it not? Objection, Brennan said. Speculation. Sustained, the judge ruled. Rachel switched tactics. Can you tell me Sophie's current pediatrician's name? Jennifer blinked. I do not know. Her daycare center. I do not know. Her favorite food? Her favorite toy? The name of a single friend she plays with. I have been gone. How would I know those things? Exactly, Rachel said. You would not know because you have not been present in her life. No further questions. Brian took the stand next. Rachel walked him through the past 18 months methodically. His injury, job loss, poverty, the grocery store encounter with James, his climb back to stability. During this entire time, who took care of Sophie? Rachel asked. I did, Brian said. Every day, every night, every doctor visit, every meal, every diaper change, every nightmare, every milestone. I was there for all of it. Even when you were homeless. Especially then, Brian replied. I made sure she had food even when I did not. I kept her safe. I never abandoned her, no matter how hard things got. Rachel introduced evidence systematically. Medical records, daycare records, employment documentation, character references, financial records showing consistent support despite poverty, photos of Sophie at various ages, always with Brian. Then came the character witnesses. Nicole testified about Brian's journey from the shelter to stability. Pastor Bradley spoke about Brian's commitment to Sophie and community involvement. Dr. Crawford provided detailed medical testimony about Sophie's development and Brian's excellent parenting. James took the stand and described meeting Brian in the grocery store. I saw a father who had $1 to his name, but was still trying to provide for his daughter. That tells you everything about his character. He never gave up on her, even when giving up would have been easier. Brennan cross-examined James. You are personally invested in Mr. Mitchell succeeding, are you not? You employed him. I employed him because he earned it, James replied. Not as charity. He works harder than anyone in my company. His performance reviews are excellent. This is about merit, not favoritism. You have also provided significant financial support. I provided a job and opportunity. He did everything else himself. Jennifer's attorney called witnesses too. Her therapist testified about her mental health treatment. The fiancé spoke about their stable relationship. Jennifer's mother, who had been absent during her daughter's crisis, suddenly appeared to vouch for Jennifer's reformed character. But it all felt hollow compared to the mountain of evidence showing Brian's consistent, loving presence in Sophie's life. The final testimony came from a court-appointed child psychologist who had evaluated both parents. She spoke carefully but clearly. Sophie has a strong, secure attachment to her father. She shows no recognition of or attachment to her mother. Disrupting this primary relationship at this developmental stage could cause significant harm. While I acknowledge Mrs. Mitchell's stated desire to repair the relationship, the child's best interest must take priority. Judge Morrison listened to everything. She asked questions. She reviewed documents. She watched Brian with Sophie during breaks, noting how the child naturally turned to him for comfort, and how he responded with practiced ease. Finally, after 4 hours of testimony, the judge spoke. I will issue my ruling now rather than take this under advisement. I have heard enough to make an informed decision. Brian's heart hammered against his ribs. He held Sophie close. James sat behind him, a steady presence. Mrs. Mitchell, I do not doubt that you experienced mental health challenges. Postpartum depression is real and serious. However, the appropriate response to mental health crisis is to seek help, not to abandon your child completely. The judge's voice was firm. For 18 months, you had no contact with your daughter. You made no effort to verify her well-being. You contributed nothing to her support. During that same period, Mr. Mitchell sacrificed everything to care for her. He maintained stability despite extraordinary hardships. The evidence of his commitment is overwhelming. She looked directly at Jennifer. I am troubled by the timing of your custody petition. It appears connected to your recent engagement rather than genuine parental concern. Sophie does not know you. She has no attachment to you. Forcing a relationship at this point would serve your needs, not hers. Judge Morrison turned to Brian. Mr. Mitchell, your devotion to your daughter is evident. You have provided excellent care under difficult circumstances. Sophie is thriving because of your efforts. She delivered her ruling. Sole legal and physical custody remains with Brian Mitchell. Mrs. Mitchell is granted supervised visitation rights of 4 hours per month for 6 months. After that period, we will reassess based on consistency of participation and Sophie's adjustment. Mrs. Mitchell will also be responsible for reimbursing Mr. Mitchell for child support covering the past 18 months. Court adjourned. The gavel came down. Brian could not breathe, could not move, could not process what just happened. He won. Sophie was his. Legally. Finally. Completely. Rachel smiled. You did it. James leaned forward and squeezed Brian's shoulder. She is yours. She stays yours. Jennifer sat frozen in her seat, her perfect makeup streaking as tears fell. Her attorney spoke to her quietly. The fiancé looked uncomfortable. They gathered their things and left quickly. Brian stood, still holding Sophie. She had fallen asleep during the proceedings, exhausted by the strange environment. She looked peaceful in his arms. Safe. Loved. Let us go home, Rachel said gently. They walked out of the courthouse into bright sunlight. Brian stopped on the steps and looked up at the sky. Relief and joy and gratitude washed over him in waves. Thank you, he said to Rachel. To James. To the universe. To God. To whoever was listening. You earned this, James said. You fought for her. You never gave up. That is why you won. They went to lunch to celebrate. Sophie woke up and ate French fries, completely unaware her entire future had just been secured. Brian watched her laugh and play, and felt peace settle into his bones. She was his. Always had been. Now the law agreed. That night, after Sophie was asleep, Brian sat on his apartment balcony and cried. Not from sadness. From relief. From joy. From the overwhelming knowledge that sometimes justice actually happened. Sometimes love actually won. He thought about the man he had been 18 months ago. Broken. Desperate. Standing in a checkout line with $1. He thought about the man he was now. Employed. Educated. Stable. A father in every sense of the word. The journey was not over. There would be more challenges. But tonight, he could rest. Tonight, he could celebrate. Tonight, he could simply be grateful. For James who stopped to help. For Nicole who navigated the system. For Rachel who fought the legal battle. For Pastor Bradley and Julie and all the others who formed community around him. For every person who chose kindness when they could have chosen indifference. And most of all, for Sophie. The little girl who gave him purpose when he had none. The reason he kept fighting. The proof that love could survive anything. Brian looked at the stars and smiled. They had made it. Together. And nothing would ever separate them again. 1 year after the custody hearing, Brian stood in the lobby of Harrison Tech Solutions watching employees arrive for the company's 10th anniversary celebration. He wore a new suit, purchased with money he saved from his most recent raise. Facilities Director. The title still felt surreal sometimes. Sophie, now 3 years old, stood beside him in a red dress, holding a small bouquet of flowers. She was going to present them to James later, during his speech. She took the responsibility seriously, practicing her delivery repeatedly that morning. When do I give Mr. James the flowers? She asked for the 10th time. When he finishes talking, Brian reminded her patiently. Just like we practiced. The past year had been transformative. Jennifer's supervised visits lasted 3 months before she stopped showing up. Apparently, motherhood did not fit into her new life as conveniently as she expected. Brian was not surprised. The court records showed she had never contacted the visitation coordinator to reschedule after missing the 3rd visit. Her absence did not hurt Sophie because you could not miss what you never knew. Sophie had her father, her extended community family, and a stability that made her childhood worlds away from Brian's desperate beginnings. Brian completed his associate degree in business administration with a 3.9 GPA. He walked across the stage at graduation with Sophie cheering from the audience. James hosted a celebration dinner, inviting everyone who had supported Brian's journey. Now Brian was enrolled in a bachelor's program at Texas State University. Online classes, evenings and weekends. Slowly working toward a degree in organizational leadership. James continued to cover tuition costs, calling it an investment in the company's future. "You will run operations someday," James told him. "Maybe even take over when I retire. You have the skills and the character. Keep developing both." Brian's volunteer work at the church food pantry expanded. He started a support group for single fathers, using his story to give hope to men facing similar struggles. Every other week, they met to share resources, offer encouragement, and remind each other they were not alone. One of those fathers, a man named Kevin, recently got hired at Harrison Tech Solutions in the warehouse. Brian recommended him. James did not hesitate to give him a chance. "You are creating a pipeline," James observed. "Finding people who need help and connecting them with opportunities. That is leadership." The anniversary celebration was elaborate. James had rented the entire first floor of the building, transforming it into an elegant event space. Caterers prepared food. A live band set up in the corner. Employees and their families filled the room, celebrating a decade of success. Beth had worked with Brian to create a timeline display showing the company's growth. Photos from the early days when James worked out of a small rented office. Articles about major client wins. Images of the expanding team. And prominently featured in the recent section, photos of community initiatives. The hiring program. The charitable giving. The scholarship fund. James arrived fashionably late, as befitting a CEO. But he immediately sought out Brian. "Are you ready?" he asked. "For what?" Brian replied, confused. "My speech. I am talking about you. Hope that is okay." Brian felt his face flush. "You do not have to do that." "I know," James said. "But I want to. Your story matters. It shows what is possible when people choose kindness." At 7 o'clock, James took the stage. The room quieted. He spoke about the company's founding, the early struggles, the growth. He thanked employees for their dedication. He acknowledged clients for their trust. He praised the leadership team for their vision. Then his tone shifted. 10 years ago, I built this company to prove I could succeed despite my personal loss. For a long time, success meant profit margins and market share. But about 2 years ago, I learned what success actually means." He looked at Brian. "I met a man in a grocery store. He had $1 and a crying baby. He needed diapers he could not afford. He could have stolen them. Nobody would have blamed him. But he did not. He tried to put them back because character mattered more than desperation." The room was silent. Everyone listening. I helped him that night. Gave him a job. Connected him with resources. It felt good to help. But I did not realize at the time that he was helping me more than I was helping him. He showed me what real strength looks like. What real success means. James continued. "Brian Mitchell is our facilities director now. He manages our building, our vendors, our systems. But more importantly, he reminds us why we work. Not for profit. Not for status. But to create value that extends beyond business." He gestured to the community initiative displays. "Because of Brian's influence, we started programs to help people experiencing hardship. We hire people others overlook. We give second chances. We create opportunities. And our company is better for it. Our culture is stronger. Our purpose is clearer." James smiled. "Brian, would you come up here?" Brian's heart hammered as he walked to the stage. Sophie followed, clutching her flowers. "I am announcing tonight the creation of the Sophie Mitchell Scholarship Fund," James said. "It will provide financial support for children of single parents who want to pursue education. We are seeding it with $500,000. And we are challenging our employees and clients to help it grow." The room erupted in applause. Brian felt tears burning his eyes. "You gave me a purpose beyond profit," James said to Brian. "Thank you for letting me help." Thank you for showing me what matters. Sophie stepped forward and handed James the flowers perfectly, exactly as practiced. James crouched down to accept them. Thank you, Sophie, he said. Your daddy is very special. I hope you know that. I know, Sophie said confidently. He is the best daddy in the whole world. Laughter and more applause filled the room. Brian picked up Sophie and held her close, overwhelmed by emotion. Later, after the speeches and dinner, Brian found himself at the grocery store. The same Save Mart where everything changed. He needed milk and bread. Simple things. He walked through the aisles with Sophie in the cart, remembering the desperation he felt 2 years ago. The fear. The hopelessness. The certainty that he had failed. At the checkout, he noticed a young woman counting change. Her hands trembled as she realized she did not have enough for the formula and diapers in her cart. A baby cried in her arms. Her face showed exhaustion and defeat. Brian saw himself in her struggle. He stepped forward. Excuse me. Let me get that for you. The woman looked at him with suspicion and shame. I do not need charity. It is not charity, Brian said gently. It is community. Someone helped me once when I needed it most. Let me pass that forward, please. He paid for her items and added extra formula, diapers, and basic groceries. The woman cried as she thanked him. How can I pay you back? She asked. You cannot, Brian said. But someday, when you are stable, help someone else. That is how this works. We'll lift each other. He gave her his card. This is my boss's company. We have jobs available. Childcare support. If you need help beyond groceries, call this number. Ask for Beth. Tell her Brian sent you. The woman clutched the card like a lifeline. Why are you doing this? Because someone did it for me, Brian replied simply. Because kindness matters. Because you and your baby deserve a chance. He left the store with Sophie, who had watched the entire interaction with wide eyes. Daddy helped that lady, Sophie observed. Yes, baby. We help people when we can. Because Mr. James helped us. Exactly, Brian said. Mr. James helped us. Now we help others. That is how love works. It keeps growing and growing. Sophie nodded, satisfied with this explanation. They drove home through familiar Austin streets. The city lights reflected off the car windows. Music played softly on the radio. Sophie sang along, her small voice filling the space with joy. Brian thought about the past 2 years, the transformation, the second chances, the kindness of strangers who became family. He thought about James, who saw suffering and chose to act, who used his resources to create opportunities, who turned personal tragedy into purpose. He thought about Nicole, Rachel, Pastor Bradley, Julie, Beth, and countless others who formed the community that caught him when he fell. He thought about Sophie, who gave him a reason to keep fighting even when fighting felt impossible. Most of all, he thought about what he learned. That asking for help was not weakness. That accepting kindness was not shameful. That second chances were real. That community mattered more than independence. That love, genuine love, could overcome anything. They pulled into their apartment complex. Brian carried Sophie inside. She was sleepy, her head heavy on his shoulder. He changed her into pajamas and tucked her into bed. Daddy, she said as he turned off the light. I love you. I love you too, Sophie. More than you will ever know. To the moon and back, she asked, using their special phrase. To the moon and back, he confirmed. And all the stars in between. She smiled and closed her eyes, safe and loved and secure. Brian walked to his own room and looked out the window at the Austin skyline. Somewhere out there, the woman from the grocery store was probably feeding her baby with the formula he bought. Maybe feeling a little hope. Maybe believing things could get better. Somewhere, James was probably in his empty apartment, finding purpose in generosity, turning grief into good. Somewhere, other families were struggling, wondering if they would make it, needing someone to see them, someone to help, someone to remind them they were not alone. Brian did not know their stories yet, but he would keep showing up, keep volunteering, keep connecting people with resources, keep sharing his testimony. Because he learned the most important truth of his life standing in that Save-Mart checkout line with $1 and a crying baby. Kindness was not weakness. Hope was not foolish. Second chances were real. And sometimes, the best thing you could do was let someone help you. Then use that help to help others. It was a simple philosophy, but it changed everything. Brian smiled and closed his curtains. Tomorrow he would wake up and go to work, study for his classes, parent his daughter, volunteer at church, live his ordinary, beautiful life. But tonight, he would just rest, grateful, content, hopeful, because he knew now what he did not know 2 years ago. The story was not over. It was just beginning, and the best chapters were still ahead. Brian thought about the past 2 years, the transformation, the second chances, the kindness of strangers who became family. He thought about James, who saw suffering and chose to act, who used his resources to create opportunities, who turned personal tragedy into purpose. He thought about Nicole, Rachel, Pastor Bradley, Julie, Beth, and countless others who formed the community that caught him when he fell. He thought about Sophie, who gave him a reason to keep fighting even when fighting felt impossible. Most of all, he thought about what he learned. That asking for help was not weakness. That accepting kindness was not shameful. That second chances were real. That community mattered more than independence. That love, genuine love, could overcome anything. They pulled into their apartment complex. Brian carried Sophie inside. She was sleepy, her head heavy on his shoulder. He changed her into pajamas and tucked her into bed. "Daddy," she said as he turned off the light. "I love you." "I love you too, Sophie. More than you will ever know." "To the moon and back," she asked, using their special phrase. "To the moon and back," he confirmed. "And all the stars in between." She smiled and closed her eyes, safe and loved and secure. Brian walked to his own room and looked out the window at the Austin skyline. Somewhere out there, the woman from the grocery store was probably feeding her baby with the formula he bought. Maybe feeling a little hope. Maybe believing things could get better. Somewhere, James was probably in his empty apartment, finding purpose in generosity, turning grief into good. Somewhere, other families were struggling, wondering if they would make it, needing someone to see them, someone to help, someone to remind them they were not alone. Brian did not know their stories yet, but he would keep showing up, keep volunteering, keep connecting people with resources, keep sharing his testimony, because he learned the most important truth of his life standing in that Save-Mart checkout line with $1 and a crying baby. Kindness was not weakness. Hope was not foolish. Second chances were real. And sometimes, the best thing you could do was let someone help you. Then use that help to help others. It was a simple philosophy, but it changed everything. Brian smiled and closed his curtains. Tomorrow he would wake up and go to work, study for his classes, parent his daughter, volunteer at church, live his ordinary, beautiful life. But tonight, he would just rest, grateful, content, hopeful, because he knew now what he did not know 2 years ago. The story was not over. It was just beginning, and the best chapters were still ahead.